Sometimes when we're looking at different centers and churches around the country for inspiration, we look online. Actually, I'd say that's pretty often. And there's a place, is it in Seattle, the Glide? I'm asking Rick a question that he wasn't planning on answering one. The Glide, where's the Glide?
The Glide is in California.
No, it's in California. Well, they have a singing minister there. So he'll either pop out of his message into a song or vice versa. And I'm doing a song message sandwich again today. Because if you haven't figured that out already, there are two things I love so much. And one is being steeped in this teaching and celebrating it with you. And the other is singing about it. So they have equal footing in my life. Today, we are continuing the theme for the month of October, which is opening to grandeur. Because we had our grand opening in October, and it seemed fitting to make this month about each of us opening to our own grandeur. And one of the parts of the mission of Centers for Spiritual Living worldwide, and there are over 450 of them, counting us, is to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence. So today's talk is entitled A Judge, the Law of Attraction, and the Vortex. And that speaks to another part of this mission that Centers for Spiritual Living share, which is to empower individuals through teaching them about the creative power of thought. So there's this certain judge in late 19th and early 20th century history, both in India and England, who actually taught a great deal about the law of attraction and creating a vortex. So contrary to some popular belief, these ideas portrayed in What the Bleep and in The Secret and all of the Abraham teachings are not new. However, someone else said that repetition is the highest law of learning. And I think that's because we get so involved in each and every moment and hour and day and week and month and year that it's always good to have truth knocking on the door, reminding us of itself. So we're in this period of re-emergence, of rediscovering who we are yet again, and probably doing it in a greater way than the last time around. We're riding on the coattails of this thing called the New Thought movement, which was a really bold movement to reinterpret, to interpret in new ways ancient wisdom and ancient teachings. Many things that had been reserved for mystery schools and very special people only. And it got brought out during the turn of the century, late 1800s and early 1900s, and became this thing called the New Thought movement. So this judge is one of the people who inspired a great deal of that activity, including the founding of Centers for Spiritual Living as we know it today. His name is Thomas Troward. And the funny thing is that for all of his writings and for all of the impact that he had on what we're doing today, he was known as a boring speaker. He was known as someone who was so brilliant that even his most devoted small assemblies and his lectures had no idea what he was saying. But apparently they kept coming back because here we are, right? One of the people who was inspired by his work is Ernest Holmes. And Ernest Holmes is the founder of this teaching that we do here. Others, too, who are cousins of ours in the New Thought movement include unity and divine science, just to name a few. So, if you know anything about this gentleman, he could be boring. He could go right over your head and be having such a good time you probably didn't notice. And I promise, I'm going to do my best not to go there. There is a distillation of one little section of what he taught that I have put into something that fits on a Post-it note and can be used on a daily basis. I call it Thomas Troward's creative process in a nutshell. So here it is in a nutshell. He says that the creative process begins with an emotion. Simply put, when we have an emotion, the creative process has begun. Well, usually that's something that is intense. It involves motion, of course. Some say energy in motion. It involves a feeling that's intense enough to move you in some way. So the second thing that happens is that a desire forms, right? I feel this. Okay, so I want that. A desire forms. And the desire's purpose is to set in motion further the fulfillment of that thing, particularizing it. Okay, so we have an emotion, and what do you know? The next thing that comes is a desire. And we say, that's what I want. What comes after that is a great opportunity. It is the moment of judgment. For some reason, I'm thinking of Flip Wilson on the Laughing Show. Here comes the judge. I was allowed to stay up late on Monday nights to watch that. So here comes the judge within you. This moment where you get to say, okay, I've got this feeling, I've got this emotion, I'm on the move, and I want this thing that I have identified as my desire. Did you know that this is the moment where you have a choice? You can say, yeah, that would really benefit me in my life. That would have a positive impact on my family or on my work. That would have a good outcome. I think I'll roll with it. That's your opportunity to choose. Many of us cruise right by that spot, by the way, when sometimes another choice would be a better one. But let's say it's a good thing for all intents and purposes. So we have an emotion, we have a desire, we say, yep, I think this is a good one, I'm going to follow it. Maybe it's to start something, to build something, start a business, build a new home, create a club, whatever it is. Maybe it's to go back to school for something. But you've got this emotion, you've got this desire, you made the judgment call, and off you go. Well, the next thing that steps into the picture, now this is the line of the creative process unfolding in you and as you and through you. The next thing that happens is that your will gets involved and your imagination. Now, here's the funny thing. A lot of us seem to think that will equals willpower. Will and imagination are a great team because they're two different things. Will is likened in Troward's teachings as the guide on a power tool, but not the power of the tool itself. Does that make sense? I think he used a router or a lathe, maybe, because he was writing at a different time. We have way more power tools now, and still the same concept applies. That on each of those, there is something that safely guides that thing to accomplish that end without injury and in the way that is desired and intended. But the tool itself does the work. You consider that the tool is imagination. Imagination, your imagination and mine is where your power lies. Because that is always steeped in the absolute, always steeped in the infinite, always steeped in that infinite possibility. So together, will and imagination can accomplish anything. This is where you are in this part of the creative process. So will, rather than being willpower, meaning I'm going to grit my teeth and clench my fists and lock my knees and I'm going to make this happen, but you know what that does to every part of you. It doesn't work. The best that you can do is maintain for a short time and, yes, produce a result or an outcome. It will only last as long as you can hold that posture, as long as you can hold that position, as long as you can keep exerting that force from within you. However, if you let your will as the guide and your imagination as part of that infinite creative power and force work together as a team, you can do anything. So here you are again. You started with an emotion. It has given rise to a desire. You've made a judgment. You've said, yes, I'm going to do this. And then on comes your will and your imagination as a great team to do what? To guide that power. To keep your will stayed on that idea. To keep your mind stayed and keep your emotions stayed on that idea, that desire, that thing that you have said yes to. And they will do it for you. What happens next is that a vortex of attraction is created. Because the will and the imagination together around a specific idea start a rotation. It's a wonderful thing. This idea that this movement, this circular movement is so profound. Something is going away from and returning to its point of origin at the same time, continually. It requires no outside force. It is independent, gathering momentum, gathering power, gathering strength, and creating a vortex of attraction. And then what it does, by the way, whether it's a cyclone or a water spout or a spiritual spout, an idea spout, is that it pulls towards it everything that is like itself. And things begin to take shape. There is a spiritual prototype. You've read about prototypes if you follow new cars being developed. And then they have the newest ones on display in the showroom with the girls in the bikinis, just in case you need a little help paying attention, right? Well, it's the same thing. Prototype means the first one. The first one is created by you having that emotion, that desire, making a choice. Your will and imagination are all in, and things begin to take shape. They begin to gather momentum. They begin to attract everything they require to build that first one. About that idea. So the next thing that happens is that something forms all by itself. The law of growth kicks in. And this thing that is now a life of its own, with the forces of attraction having pulled what was necessary for it to begin, it's like it has its own appetite now. It is a life unto itself. And it will call to it, hunt down, call up, attract, reach out to, move next to, everything that it needs to be completely fulfilled. Everything in life is like that. You could also think of the analogy of a seed which is packed with everything that is required to be made fully manifest. The thing is that your thought and your emotion are just like that. They have the same power. And notice we didn't start with thought, because a creative process is in motion once emotion is in the game. Those of you who have watched The Secret know we're quite relieved that you just don't think of a thing and it starts showing up. Thank goodness there's a slight delay. Thank goodness. Okay, so this is what it looks like to get a result. You have emotion, you have desire, you have judgment, you have will and imagination. A spiritual prototype, or a nucleus, if you will, a center forms around which the forces of attraction start to move and pull everything that's required in, and then you get the law of growth kicking in. There's your result, a real life. And like I said, it could be a new apartment, a new job, a new relationship. It could be a garden. It could be a fence. It could be a new car. It could be a meal. It could be rearranging the furniture in your bedroom. It could be anything. Here's what happens, however, when we forget that we have a choice. You have an emotion. Okay? Maybe it's a hand on the hip kind of emotion. And then you have a desire. Maybe it's a grit your teeth kind of desire, right? And then do you stop and think, well, should I do this or should I not? No, probably the black eye has already taken place, or the broken whatever, whatever it is, it's already happened. Whoops. I went unconscious. I forgot I had a choice to decide whether this would be the right thing to do or not. And wow, have I got a mess now. Let's say you were still plowing through, unaware that you had another choice. What happens next? Okay, your will and your imagination are on board and on fire. All you can think about is this thing. And all that you can imagine is how bad it's going to look in a minute, in an hour, tomorrow, next week, next year, for eternity. Then what? You've created one heck of a vortex. And what does it do? It calls in every person, every situation and circumstance, and everything to flesh it out, to make it real. And it creates a life of its own. You know what I'm talking about. And then the law of growth kicks in because, it doesn't say yes or no. It just does what it does, which is actually always yes. It never stops and says, you probably don't want to do that, it wouldn't be good for you. We're free, right? That's the part about that will thing. We're free. So then you have what? You have this thing that is so real. You're sure it's real. And it's got an appetite. Because it needs what it needs as this thing to survive, right? It's got an identity. That's what it feels like. It's got an appetite for everything that is required for it to continue living. Oh, what a mess. I looked up the term for, when they have those big toxic waste sites, and now we've had something for some time, since the 70s, I think, called a Superfund. You've got a Superfund site on your hands now. And there's hope. Because that thing is just showing up again and again and again every day, only because you're caught in a cycle of emotion and desire, forgetting that you have a choice. That was the judgment by default. And your will and your imagination are caught up in what you can see and just can barely get a glimpse of anything but that. And then the forces of attraction are doing what they do, and the law of growth is doing what it does, and it seems so real. It seems like there's no way to break that cycle, but there is. Just go back to the beginning. It's the same thing. Stop. Take a breath. Stop. Take another breath. And say, wait. Whew. How is this making me feel? I bet that emotion will give you an indication of where you're at with regard to who you truly are and what's really possible. And you can say, well, I feel like garbage. I feel mad. I feel sad. I feel lonely. I feel, whatever. I don't feel very good. And you can discover the opposite of that is the feeling you do want to have. And court that emotion by imagining what would be like if it were already so. And get yourself back into a place of having that emotion that goes with what you do want. And there are lots of people here who can help you with that. Then you get into the emotion of what you do want. And you remember what the desire is of what you do want. And then you remember that you have a choice and you say, yes, I really want this. And then you use your will consciously, on purpose, to guide your imagination, which is hugely powerful, in the direction of what you do want. Then the forces of attraction can work for you without your effort. Effortlessly. Drawing every person, place, thing, situation, circumstance, everything required to fulfill that desire. And then that takes on a life of its own. It has its own appetites for more good, More supportive circumstances, more supportive people, more supportive nutrients, more supportive funding, more supportive everything. And that's your result. So it's one process with a really important point in the middle of it, which is your choice. Your choice. I invite you to consider that when that moment comes, that you'll release your grip on what's awful. Release your hold on what's not working. Let go. And let something greater assist you in remembering what's good, what works. Let your will be aligned with that. Let your imagination be aligned with that. And let the law of attraction, the vortex, the forces of creation do the work. Relax. Let it be, and let it be good. I'm going to invite you to shortly pray out with me, and then we're going to sing a song which will require you to stand up and sing. Okay. Thank you. I know that there is one power, one presence, and one substance in this universe. I know that it is the truth of all that is and the truth of us. As such, I know that it knows what to think, what to feel, what to desire, what to say yes to, what to will and imagine, what to call in, and what to choose and have and design and embrace and embody as our experience. It is far greater than anything that we could imagine on our greatest day, and far, far greater than what we call in while we forget. And so I give thanks for this opportunity to remember this truth together, knowing that it blesses us and all whom we touch, today and always. In gratitude for this, as we open our eyes, we simply say thank you. We let it go. And so it is.